The silence of space had been broken. After 200 years of nothing but empty darkness, something was coming from Earth. Lieutenant Sarah Kane stared at the screen in disbelief. The numbers didn't make sense. The energy readings were off the charts, bigger than anything she had ever seen. She rubbed her eyes and looked again. The readings were still there. "Commander Morris," she called out, her voice shaking slightly. "You need to see this." Commander Tom Morris walked over to her station. He was an old Zephyrian with blue skin and 4 arms that moved gracefully as he worked. For 50 years he had watched the border of the Terran exclusion zone. Nothing had ever happened. The humans had been gone for 2 centuries and everyone assumed they were dead or had given up trying to return to galactic society. "What is it, Kane?" Morris asked, looking at the screen. His face changed when he saw the readings. "That can't be right. Run a diagnostic." Sarah's fingers flew over the controls. "I've run it 3 times, sir. The sensors are working perfectly. Something massive is coming from the direction of Earth, and sir, it's big, really big." Morris felt his blood turn cold. The humans had been banished from the galaxy because they were too violent, too aggressive. The Galactic Empire had voted them out after humans had won too many wars and conquered too many worlds. The peaceful races of the galaxy had decided that humans were a threat to everyone's safety, but that was 200 years ago. Most people thought the humans were probably extinct by now. Their home planet Earth was in a distant part of the galaxy, far from any trade routes or habitable worlds. How could they have survived? "Send an emergency message to Galactic Command," Morris ordered. "Tell them we have detected unknown ships approaching from the Terran system." As Sarah sent the message, more readings appeared on the screen. The ships were moving fast, much faster than anything the Empire had ever built, and they were heading straight for the first Imperial world outside the exclusion zone. 3 hours later, the response came back from Galactic Command. They were sending a fleet to investigate, but it would take 2 days for them to arrive, sir, Sarah said, her voice even more worried now. "The ships are slowing down. They'll reach the border in 6 hours. Morris looked at the screen again. Whatever was coming, it was huge. The energy signature was bigger than their entire monitoring station. He had a bad feeling about this. 6 hours later, they saw it. The ship that emerged from faster-than-light travel was beyond anything they had imagined. It was enormous, stretching across 50 kilometers of space. Its hull was dark metal that seemed to absorb light, and it was covered in structures that looked like cities. Thousands of smaller ships flew around it like birds around a mountain. "Sweet stars," Morris whispered. "What have the humans built?" Before Sarah could answer, their communication system activated. A voice spoke in clear galactic standard, with the accent of old Earth. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Human Federation ship Defiance. We are requesting permission to enter Imperial space. We wish to speak with your leaders about rejoining galactic society." Morris stared at the screen. The human voice was calm and polite, nothing like the aggressive warriors that stories described. But the ship was a monster. It could probably destroy their entire monitoring station without even trying. "This is Commander Morris of Imperial Border Station 7, he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. I need to contact my superiors. Please wait." "Of course, Commander," the human voice replied. "We will wait. We have waited 200 years. A few more hours won't hurt." Morris immediately sent an emergency message to the capital. Within minutes, his screen was filled with the face of General Alex Carter, the Imperial military commander. "Morris, what's the situation?" Carter demanded. "Sir, the humans are back. They have a ship. I've never seen anything like it. It's huge, and it has thousands of escort vessels. They're asking permission to rejoin galactic society." Carter's face went pale. "How many ships?" "Just one, sir. But it's the size of a small moon." There was silence on the communication line. Then Carter spoke again, his voice grim. "Keep them talking. Don't make them angry. We're sending a fleet, but it will take time to get there." "Sir, what are my orders if they try to cross the border?" "Pray they don't," Carter replied and cut the communication. Morris turned back to the human ship. It hung in space like a dark star, waiting patiently. He opened a channel to Admiral Morrison. "Admiral, my government is considering your request. They ask that you wait for their official response." "Thank you, Commander," Morrison replied. "While we wait, would you like to know what we've been doing for the past 200 years? Morris felt curious despite his fear. "What do you mean?" "We've been preparing," Morrison said simply. "Preparing to come home. On the screen, Morris could see the massive human ship more clearly now. It wasn't just a warship. He could see gardens and parks through transparent sections of the hull. There were lakes and forests inside the ship. It was like a piece of Earth had been turned into a spacecraft. "Commander," Sarah whispered, "I'm reading 2 million life signs on that ship." 2 million. The humans had built a flying city and brought it to their doorstep. "Admiral Morrison," Morris said carefully, "your ship is impressive. How many more ships does humanity have?" There was a pause. Then Morrison spoke, and Morris could hear the smile in his voice. "Commander, this is just our messenger ship. We sent it ahead to make contact. The real fleet is still at Earth, waiting to see if you'll have us back." Morris felt his legs go weak. If this massive ship was just a messenger, what was their main fleet like? Across the galaxy, emergency meetings were being called. The news spread like wildfire through the Imperial worlds. The humans were back, and they had technology that made the Empire's best ships look like toys. In military bases and government buildings, leaders asked the same questions. How had the humans become so powerful? What did they want? And most importantly, could the Empire stop them if they decided to take revenge for their exile? But on the border, Admiral Morrison waited patiently for an answer. He had no way of knowing that his simple request to rejoin galactic society had already caused the biggest crisis in Imperial history. The humans were back, and nothing would ever be the same. General Alex Carter stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the human ship grow larger on the screen. Even though they were still millions of kilometers away, the massive vessel filled the display. His fleet of 300 ships, the largest force the Empire had assembled in 50 years, looked tiny compared to the single human craft. "Sir, we're receiving another message from the humans," his communication officer reported. "Put it through," Carter ordered. Admiral Morrison's voice filled the bridge. "General Carter, I assume? We detected your fleet approaching. Quite impressive, though I should mention, there's no need for military posturing. We come in peace," Carter gritted his teeth. The human sounded so casual, as if 300 Imperial warships were no threat at all. "Admiral Morrison, you are in violation of the Terran Exclusion Treaty. Turn your ships around immediately, or we will be forced to take action." There was a pause. Then Morrison replied, sounding almost amused. "General, I appreciate your position, but that treaty was signed 200 years ago. Perhaps it's time to discuss new arrangements?" "The treaty stands," Carter declared. "You have 1 hour to leave Imperial space." "I'm afraid that won't be possible," Morrison said calmly. "We've come too far to turn back now. But please, let us show you something. We think you'll find it interesting." Before Carter could respond, the space around the human ship began to change. Energy flowed from the massive vessel like water, forming a shimmering bubble around it. The energy shield was so large it could have protected an entire planet. "By the stars," Carter's tactical officer whispered. "Sir, their shield readings are impossible. It's like they've turned space itself into armor." Carter stared at the display. The Empire's best shields could maybe protect a single large ship. The humans had created a barrier that enclosed their entire massive vessel and its escort fleet. "That's just our basic defensive system," Morrison's voice continued. "We developed it about 50 years ago. Would you like to see what we've done with terraforming?" Without waiting for an answer, the human ship moved toward a dead moon orbiting the nearby gas giant. Carter watched in horror as beams of energy shot out from the vessel, hitting the barren rock. The moon began to change. Atmosphere formed around it in minutes. Clouds appeared, then oceans. The gray surface turned green as plant life spread across continents. In less than an hour, the humans had transformed a lifeless rock into a living world. "We call it instant terraforming," Morrison explained. "We can turn any planet into a garden world in a matter of hours. We've been practicing on the dead worlds around Earth." Carter's hands shook as he gripped the railing. The Empire's best terraforming teams needed decades to prepare a world for life. The humans had done it in an hour. "How is this possible?" he demanded. 200 years of progress, General," Morrison replied. "When you're alone in the galaxy, you have a lot of time to think and improve. We've solved problems your people are still working on." On the human ship, Captain Lisa Barnes watched the Imperial fleet through the observation deck windows. The alien ships looked primitive compared to human technology, but she felt no pride in their superiority. Only sadness. "They're scared," she said to Commander Ryan Kelly, who stood beside her. "Can you blame them? Ryan replied. Last time they saw humans, we were conquering half the galaxy. Now we show up with technology they can't understand. Lisa nodded. The history books told the story clearly. Humans had been young and aggressive when they first joined the galactic community. They had fought wars, won territories, and made enemies. The other races had finally decided that humans were too dangerous to live among civilized people. Admiral Morrison to the bridge, came the voice over the intercom. Lisa and Ryan made their way to the bridge, where Admiral Morrison was speaking with the Imperial General. The conversation wasn't going well. Your demands are unacceptable, General Carter was saying. The galactic community voted to exclude humanity. That decision stands. General, Morrison replied patiently. Let me ask you something. How many wars has the Empire fought in the last 200 years? Carter paused. That's not relevant. Humor me. 17 major conflicts and dozens of smaller ones, Carter admitted reluctantly. And how many people have died in those wars? Millions, Carter said quietly. Morrison nodded. In the same 200 years, humanity has fought 0 wars. We've had 0 casualties from violence. We've spent our time building, learning, and growing. Tell me, General, which civilization sounds more dangerous to you? Carter had no answer for that. Dr. Maya Singh, the chief scientist aboard the Defiance, joined the conversation. General Carter, we've been monitoring Imperial space for decades. We know about the plague in the Outer Rim territories. We know about the famines on the agricultural worlds. We know about the dying stars that threaten entire systems. What's your point? Carter asked. We can help, Maya said simply. We have cures for diseases your people have never seen. We can fix dying stars and restore dead worlds. We can solve problems that have plagued the galaxy for centuries. Lieutenant Ben Walsh, one of the human fighter pilots, watched the exchange from his cockpit. His small ship was part of the escort fleet, but even his fighter had technology the Empire couldn't match. His ship could travel faster than light on its own, something Imperial fighters couldn't do. This is crazy, he said to his wingman over the radio. We could conquer the entire Empire without breaking a sweat, and instead we're asking permission to help them. That's what makes us different now, his wingman replied. 200 years ago we might have conquered them. Now we want to save them. Back on the Imperial flagship, General Carter was in communication with the capital. The faces of a dozen military leaders filled his screen, all talking at once. Sir, their technology is beyond anything we've ever seen, Carter reported. They've shown us capabilities that rewrite the laws of physics as we know them. What are their demands? Asked Admiral Torres from the Second Fleet. That's the strange part, Carter replied. They don't seem to want anything except to rejoin galactic society. They say they want to help us. It's a trick, declared General Hayes from the Third Fleet. No one develops technology like that just to help their enemies. But what if it's not? Carter asked. What if they really have changed? The screen went silent. Finally, Admiral Torres spoke. Carter, you're in command out there. What's your assessment? Carter looked at the massive human ship on his display. It could destroy his entire fleet without effort. But it just sat there waiting patiently for an answer. Sir, I think we're dealing with a completely different human civilization than the one we expelled 2 centuries ago. They have the power to take whatever they want, but they're asking for permission instead. Recommendations? Carter thought for a long moment. I recommend we listen to what they have to say. Because honestly, sir, if they wanted to hurt us, we couldn't stop them anyway. As the Imperial fleet waited for orders from the capital, the human ship continued its patient vigil. Inside the vessel, 2 million humans went about their daily lives, tending gardens, teaching children, and working on projects that would benefit all life in the galaxy. Admiral Morrison sat in his chair, watching the Imperial ships on his screen. He remembered the stories his grandfather had told him about the old days when humans fought wars and conquered worlds. Those days were long gone. Sir, Captain Barnes reported, we're receiving a transmission from the Imperial capital. It's Chancellor Ross herself, Morrison smiled. Put her through, Lisa, it's time to talk. Chancellor Nina Ross sat in the emergency session chamber, surrounded by representatives from 1,000 worlds. The great dome above them showed the stars, but today those stars seemed threatening instead of beautiful. Somewhere out there, a single human ship was making the entire galactic empire question everything they believed. Order! Order! Nina called out as voices rose in panic around the chamber. We will discuss this calmly. High Counselor Veltar, the ancient Zephyrian who had cast the deciding vote to exile humanity 2 centuries ago, stood slowly. His forearms trembled with age, but his voice was still strong. Chancellor Ross, I was there when we voted to remove the humans from our society. I remember their wars, their aggression, their hunger for conquest. Are we really going to welcome them back? Counselor Dex from the mining world stood up. With respect, Veltar, that was 200 years ago. None of us were alive then except you. Maybe things have changed. Things don't change that much, Veltar replied. Humans are still humans. Nina looked at the reports spread across her desk. The intelligence they had gathered about the human ship was disturbing and amazing at the same time. The vessel carried 2 million people and had technology that seemed like magic. But more importantly, it had done nothing aggressive since arriving at their borders. Counselor Mex, what do our intelligence services tell us about Earth? Nina asked. Counselor Mex, a tall reptilian creature with green scales, activated a holographic display. Chancellor, our long-range sensors have been watching the Earth system for decades. What we found is remarkable. The hologram showed the solar system around Earth, but it looked nothing like the historical records. Dozens of worlds orbited the sun, all green and blue with life. How many planets are there? Nina asked, staring at the display. 57 habitable worlds, Chancellor. They've built artificial planets and moved others into the perfect orbits. The entire solar system has become a garden. Murmurs of amazement filled the chamber. Creating even one artificial world was beyond the Empire's technology. What about their population? Asked Counselor Zane from the agricultural worlds. 50 billion humans, Chancellor. All living in perfect harmony. No wars, no conflicts, no crime. They've created a paradise? Veltar scoffed. Impossible. Humans can't live in peace. It's not in their nature. The evidence suggests otherwise, Mex replied. Our deep space observers have been watching them for decades. They've had no internal conflict since the exile. Nina stood and walked to the window overlooking the capital city. Below her, millions of beings from hundreds of different species lived and worked together. The Empire had always prided itself on being peaceful and civilized. But now it seemed the humans had surpassed them. Have we received any demands from Admiral Morrison? She asked. That's the strange part, Chancellor, replied Ambassador Tony Clark, who had just arrived from the border. They don't want anything except to talk. No territory, no resources, no revenge for the exile. They just want to rejoin galactic society. Tony was human himself, one of the few who had been living in Empire space when the exile was declared. He had chosen to stay rather than return to Earth. Now, at 90 years old, he was the Empire's expert on human culture. Tony, you know humans better than anyone here, Nina said. What do you think they really want? Tony smiled sadly. Chancellor, I think they want to come home. The humans I know are social creatures. Being alone in the galaxy for 200 years must have been painful for them. But why now? Demanded Veltar. Why not 50 years ago or 100? Because they needed time to prove they had changed, Tony replied. Think about it. If they had returned 50 years ago with their old aggressive nature but advanced technology, they could have conquered the galaxy. Instead, they waited until they had grown into something better. Nina returned to her seat and activated her personal communication system. Admiral Morrison's face appeared on the screen, calm and patient. Admiral, I am Chancellor Ross. I understand you wish to address the Galactic Council. Yes, Chancellor. We have much to discuss. Before we proceed, I must ask, what assurance can you give us that humanity has truly changed? Our records show that your people were quite aggressive when they left. Morrison nodded. A fair question, Chancellor. Perhaps actions speak louder than words. Are you aware of the plague affecting your outer rim territories? Nina paused. The plague had been ravaging the frontier worlds for 30 years. Millions had died, and the Empire's best doctors had found no cure. Yes, we are aware of it. We have the cure, Morrison said simply. We developed it 10 years ago when our deep space sensors detected the outbreak. We've been waiting for permission to help. You've had a cure for 10 years and said nothing? Chancellor, would you have accepted help from exiled humans? Would you have trusted medicine from the people you considered too dangerous to live among you? Nina had to admit he was right. The Empire would have rejected any help from humanity out of fear and suspicion. We also have solutions for the famine on the agricultural worlds, technology to repair the dying star in the Kepler system, and methods to clean the polluted oceans of the industrial planets, Morrison continued. We've been preparing to help the galaxy for decades. Counselor Veltar leaned forward. "And what do you want in return for this help?" "Nothing," Morrison replied. "We want to give freely, as neighbors should." The chamber fell silent. Nina looked around at the faces of the counselors. Some were amazed, others suspicious, but all were uncertain. "Admiral, you must understand our position," Nina said carefully. 200 years ago, humanity conquered dozens of worlds. How do we know you won't do the same now, with superior technology? Morrison's expression grew serious. "Chancellor, if we wanted to conquer the galaxy, we wouldn't need to ask permission. Our ship could destroy your entire fleet without taking damage. We could bypass your defenses and occupy any world we chose. But we're not here to conquer. We're here to serve." Dr. Maya Singh appeared on the screen beside Morrison. "Chancellor Ross, we've spent 2 centuries learning that true strength comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. We could take the galaxy by force, but what would be the point? We'd rule over broken worlds and bitter people. We'd rather build a galaxy where everyone prospers." Nina felt a chill run down her spine. The humans were right. If they wanted to conquer the Empire, there was nothing anyone could do to stop them. The fact that they were asking for permission instead was either the greatest deception in galactic history or proof that they had truly changed. "Counselors," Nina announced, "we will take a recess to consider this matter. When we return, we will vote on humanity's request to rejoin galactic society." As the counselors filed out, Nina remained in her chair, staring at the star display above. Veltar approached her, his ancient face creased with worry. "Chancellor, I fear we are making a terrible mistake. Humans cannot be trusted." "Perhaps," Nina replied. "But Veltar, can we afford not to trust them? If they wanted to hurt us, they could do it whether we vote yes or no. At least this way we might gain something from the encounter." Veltar shook his head and walked away, muttering about the folly of youth. Nina remained alone in the chamber, facing the most important decision in the Empire's history. Outside, the human ship waited patiently, carrying 2 million people who claimed they only wanted to help. The vote would be close, she knew. Fear and hope were battling in the hearts of every counselor. The question was not whether humanity had the power to destroy the Empire. That was already proven. The question was whether they could be trusted not to use that power. In a few hours, the galaxy would learn the answer. Captain Sam Davis stood on the observation deck of his medical ship, the Mercy, watching the planet below. Kepler Prime had been dying for 30 years, ravaged by the plague that had killed millions across the outer rim. The Imperial government was still debating whether to trust humanity, but Sam couldn't wait any longer. "Dr. Williams, are you ready?" he asked. Dr. Kate Williams nodded, checking her medical equipment one last time. "The cure is ready for mass production. We can have the entire planet healthy in a week." "Sir," called Lieutenant Julie Foster from the communication station, "we're receiving a message from the planet. They're asking us to identify ourselves." Sam walked to the communication panel. He had been ordered to wait for official permission before offering help, but people were dying below. Sometimes orders had to be broken. "This is Captain Davis of the human medical vessel Mercy. We're here to help with the plague outbreak." There was a long pause. Then a voice responded, shaky with disbelief. "Did you say human? But humans are forbidden in Empire space." "The rules are changing," Sam replied. "Right now there are people dying who don't need to die." "May we help them?" Another pause. "Then please, yes. We'll accept help from anyone at this point." Sam smiled and turned to his crew. "You heard them. Let's save a planet." The Mercy descended through the atmosphere, its medical bay filled with enough cure for 50 million people. As they landed at the planetary capital's spaceport, crowds gathered to watch. Most had never seen a human before, but desperation made them brave. Dr. Williams stepped out of the ship, carrying a small medical kit. The local doctors approached cautiously, their alien features tense with worry. "I am Dr. Velkan," said the lead physician, a tall insectoid creature with compound eyes. "How do you propose to cure a plague that has defeated our best efforts for 30 years? Kate smiled and opened her kit, revealing small vials of clear liquid. "We've been studying your plague for 10 years through deep space observation. The cure is simple once you understand the disease properly." She explained the treatment in terms the local doctors could understand. Within hours, the first patients were receiving the medicine. By the end of the day, people who had been dying that morning were walking around healthy. News spread across the planet faster than the cure itself. The humans had done the impossible. They had ended 30 years of suffering in a single day. Meanwhile, on the agricultural world of New Harvest, Major Luke Thompson was dealing with a different crisis. The planet's crops had been failing for 5 years and famine threatened 20 million people. "The soil is exhausted," explained the local agricultural minister, a bovine creature named Borkan. "We've tried everything, but nothing will grow anymore." Luke nodded and activated a small device from his equipment pack. "This is a soil regenerator. It will restore your farmland to perfect condition in about 6 hours." Borkan stared at the device. 6 hours? Our experts said it would take decades to fix the soil. "Different technology," Luke replied simply. He placed the device in the center of the largest field and activated it. Energy flowed out in all directions, sinking into the earth and transforming it. By sunset, the dead brown fields had turned rich black with healthy soil. Seeds planted that evening began sprouting within hours. The famine was over before it really began. Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds. Human ships appeared wherever there was suffering or disaster, offering help without asking for anything in return. They cleaned polluted oceans, stabilized dying stars, and brought rain to desert worlds. On the industrial planet of Forge, the oceans had been poisoned by centuries of manufacturing. The water was toxic, the fish were dead, and the people were slowly dying from contaminated food and water. Commander Beth Parker arrived with a single ship and a crew of 12. The planetary governor, a metallic robot named Unit 7, met them at the spaceport. "Commander Parker, our oceans have been dead for 200 years. Surely even human technology cannot fix such damage." Beth smiled and pointed to her ship. "Governor, we're going to drop a series of biorestoration pods into your oceans. They'll break down the toxins and restart the natural ecosystem." "How long will this take?" Unit 7 asked. "About 3 weeks for full restoration." Unit 7's optical sensors flickered in what might have been surprise. 3 weeks? Our scientists estimated it would take 1,000 years to naturally repair this damage. Natural repair, yes, but we're not using natural methods. The biorestoration pods were deployed that afternoon. Within days, the toxic green oceans began to clear. Fish that had been extinct for centuries began appearing in the waters. The people of Forge watched in amazement as their dead world came back to life. Across the galaxy, Imperial military units found themselves working alongside human forces. The two groups had been enemies for centuries, but cooperation came naturally when they shared the same goal of helping people. General Carter, who had confronted the humans at the border, now found himself coordinating joint relief operations. His ships worked with human vessels to deliver aid to disaster zones across the Empire. "It's remarkable," he told his aide, Colonel Hayes, as they watched human and Imperial ships unloading supplies together. "I've never seen such efficient cooperation between different military forces." "Sir, the humans don't seem to think of us as former enemies," Hayes observed. "They treat us like old friends they haven't seen in a while." Carter nodded. "Maybe that's exactly what we are." On the planet Sanctuary, home to the largest refugee camp in the Empire, humans worked alongside alien volunteers to build permanent homes for displaced populations. What had been a temporary camp of tents and shelters was transforming into a proper city. The refugees, representing dozens of different species, watched in wonder as human construction machines built houses in hours instead of months. Children who had known only poverty and displacement suddenly had real homes with gardens and playgrounds. "Why are they helping us?" asked a young Zephyrian girl named Linda, tugging on the sleeve of a human engineer. The engineer, a man named Bob Chen, knelt down to her level. "Because everyone deserves a good home, little one, and because helping others makes us happy." Linda smiled and ran off to play in her new garden, leaving Bob with a warm feeling in his chest. This was why they had come back to the galaxy. Reports flowed back to the Imperial capital every hour. Planets that had been struggling for decades were suddenly prosperous. Diseases that had killed millions were being cured. Environmental disasters that had seemed permanent were being reversed. Chancellor Nina Ross read each report with growing amazement. In just 2 weeks, the humans had accomplished more good than the Empire had managed in 2 centuries. "Chancellor," her aide reported, "we're receiving requests from over 300 worlds asking for human assistance with various problems." "What kind of problems?" "Everything. Medical issues, environmental disasters, food shortages, energy crises. It seems like every world in the Empire has something they need help with. Nina sat back in her chair. The humans had proven their good intentions beyond any doubt. They were healing the galaxy, asking for nothing in return. Her communication system activated, showing Admiral Morrison's face. But this time he wasn't alone. Behind him stood representatives from dozens of the worlds that had received human aid. "Chancellor Ross," Morrison said, "I think it's time we talked about the future." Nina looked at the faces on her screen. Aliens who had been suspicious of humans just weeks ago now stood beside them as friends. The revolution had already happened, not through conquest but through compassion. "Yes, Admiral," she replied. "I think it is." 1 month after the human ship first appeared at the Empire's borders, Chancellor Nina Ross stood before the largest gathering in galactic history. Representatives from 10,000 worlds filled the great assembly hall on the capital planet. But today they weren't just Imperial citizens. Human delegates sat alongside alien counselors, and the atmosphere was filled with hope instead of fear. President Carol Johnson of Earth sat in the place of honor beside Nina. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but everyone in the room knew she represented the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. "Friends," Nina began, her voice carried to every world by faster-than-light communication. "1 month ago, we feared the return of humanity would bring war and conquest. Instead, they brought healing and hope." The great hall erupted in applause. Representatives from worlds that had been saved by human intervention stood and cheered. Even old Veltar, who had opposed trusting the humans, was clapping. Admiral Jake Morrison, now wearing the uniform of a Federation ambassador, watched from the human delegation. Behind him sat Captain Lisa Barnes, Dr. Maya Singh, and dozens of other humans who had become heroes across the galaxy. "The Galactic Empire served us well for 2 centuries, Nina continued. "But it was built on fear. Fear of war, fear of aggression, fear of change. Today, we dissolve that empire and create something new. Today, we form the United Galactic Federation, built on hope and cooperation." President Johnson stood and walked to the podium. Despite being the leader of the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, she spoke simply and warmly. 200 years ago, humanity was exiled for being too aggressive, too warlike. That exile was the best thing that ever happened to us. It taught us that true strength comes not from conquering others, but from lifting them up. She gestured to the crowd of representatives. "Look around you. Former enemies working together, different species sharing knowledge. This is what we dreamed of during our long exile, a galaxy where everyone prospers together." Counselor Veltar stood slowly, his ancient frame supported by his 4 arms. The hall fell silent as the eldest member of the assembly prepared to speak. "I voted to exile humanity 2 centuries ago," he said, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. "I believed they were too dangerous to live among civilized peoples. I was wrong." He turned to face President Johnson. "The humans who returned to us are not the same species we cast out. They have grown beyond our wildest imagination. They have become what we all aspired to be, truly civilized." The old Zephyrian bowed deeply to the human president. "I formally apologize for the exile, and I welcome humanity back to the galactic community." The hall erupted in the loudest applause yet. President Johnson walked over to Veltar and embraced him gently, mindful of his advanced age. "There is nothing to forgive," she said softly. "The exile made us better. We should thank you for it." Captain Sam Davis, who had broken orders to help the plague victims, stood in the medical section with Dr. Kate Williams. Around them sat representatives from the dozens of worlds they had healed. "Doctor," said Dr. Velkan from Kepler Prime, "before your arrival, we had given up hope. Our people were dying and we could do nothing. You gave us back our future," Kate smiled. "We gave you medicine. You gave us purpose. For 200 years, we wondered if we would ever be welcome in the galaxy again. You welcomed us with open arms." Major Luke Thompson sat with agricultural representatives who were planning to share human farming technology across all Federation worlds. Famine would become a thing of the past within a decade. "The soil regeneration technology will be freely available to all worlds," Luke explained. "We've also developed seeds that can grow in any climate and produce 10 times normal crop yields." Minister Borkan from New Harvest shook his bovine head in amazement. "Such generosity. On my world we have a saying, those who share their food share their heart. Humanity has shared both." In the military section, General Carter sat with his former enemies, now allies. The Imperial and human fleets had merged seamlessly, with human technology upgrading every ship in the Federation. The new shield generators will protect entire star systems, explained Commander Ryan Kelly. And the faster-than-light communication network will connect every world instantly. Help can reach anywhere in the galaxy within hours. Admiral Torres from the Second Fleet looked at the technical specifications with wonder. With this technology, we could explore beyond the galaxy itself. The Andromeda Galaxy is only 2 million light-years away. That's the plan, Ryan smiled. Humanity spent 2 centuries advancing technology. Now we want to share that advancement with the entire universe. President Johnson returned to the podium for the final ceremony. In her hands, she held a simple document, the Federation Charter that would replace the old imperial government. This charter establishes 3 basic principles, she announced. First, all species are equal members of the Federation. Second, technology and knowledge will be shared freely among all members. Third, the Federation will use its power only to help and protect, never to conquer or control. She looked out at the assembled representatives. We have learned that the greatest civilizations are not those that dominate others, but those that serve others. The United Galactic Federation will be a civilization of service. One by one, the representatives from 10,000 worlds signed the charter. Humans and aliens worked together to create a new government based on cooperation instead of competition. As the ceremony concluded, Nina Ross made one final announcement. The Federation's first major project will be the construction of exploration ships to venture beyond our galaxy. We will carry our message of peace and cooperation to the stars themselves. Admiral Morrison smiled as he watched the celebration. On screens throughout the hall, images appeared from across the galaxy. Worlds that had been dying were now thriving. Species that had been enemies were now friends. The galaxy had been transformed not by force but by compassion. Later that evening, Admiral Morrison stood on the observation deck of the Defiance, looking out at the lights of the capital city below. President Johnson joined him, and together they watched the celebrations that filled the streets. "Jake, what do you think your grandfather would say if he could see this?" she asked. Morrison chuckled. "He'd probably be amazed that we conquered the galaxy by refusing to fight." "We didn't conquer it," President Johnson corrected gently. "We saved it." Across the galaxy, former imperial worlds were already implementing human technology. Clean energy replaced polluting power sources. Advanced medicine eliminated diseases that had plagued civilizations for millennia. Terraforming technology turned barren worlds into gardens. The transformation was so rapid and complete that within 6 months, most citizens of the Federation had trouble remembering what life had been like under the old empire. Poverty, disease, and environmental destruction became historical curiosities. But perhaps the most important change was in the hearts and minds of the galaxy's people. The fear and suspicion that had divided species for centuries melted away as they worked together toward common goals. Children grew up learning about cooperation instead of competition, about service instead of conquest. The humans had returned to the galaxy not as conquerors, but as healers. They had proven that true strength lay not in the ability to destroy but in the wisdom to build. The Galactic Empire had collapsed not from military defeat, but from the overwhelming power of compassion, and in the end, everyone was better for it. The galaxy was at peace, prosperity reached every world, and the future stretched ahead bright with promise. Humanity had come home, and in doing so, had shown the universe what it truly meant to be civilized. The age of empires was over. The age of the Federation had begun,